So, good evening, everybody. Welcome to Quantum Leap into 2021. We're having a really terrific day, and I know the next session is going to be really great and one that I've been looking forward to. So, both myself and Andrew are part of the global mBraining community. We both were privileged enough to be trained by the same wonderful lady, Dr. Suzanne Henwood, and Andrew is a master coach and an MBIT trainer, and he's going to be sharing some great insights, I know, with you this evening about how to connect to yourself and tap your inner business wisdom. So I'm going to pass over to Andrew and let him take us on a little journey for 45 minutes, and I know it's going to be wonderful. So thank you, Andrew. Over to you.
Awesome. Thank you, Alex. I appreciate it, my friend. And, just want to definitely big thanks to BBX and all the other presenters for Quantum Leap 2021. This is such a cool event, and I can't believe you guys pulled this off in such a short amount of time, man. This is amazing. So thank you for asking me to be here. Also want to definitely give credit where credit is due. I am not the creator of this information. I'm just the messenger. I've found a long time ago that where I'm best is to be a great student, and then I take things and I package them in a way that seem to be very digestible to people. So definitely want to give credit to my mentor, like you said, Dr. Suzanne Henwood, and also to Grant Susulu, who unfortunately passed a year and a half ago, and Marvin Oka, who created the mBraining system. So to get us started, I want to just first tap into the sense that when we all first became entrepreneurs, because I'm going to assume that everyone here is some level of entrepreneur, business owner, because that's what the marketing was for, and that's what the invite was for. When we become an entrepreneur, typically it comes from a place of love. It comes from some place of passion. There's some intuitive sense that kicks us into gear and says, hey, this is important for me to do. Because a lot of people that have become entrepreneurs, they've stepped away from something secure. They've stepped away from something that maybe wasn't fulfilling a heart purpose. And so typically as entrepreneurs, we start with this kind of heart-centered or gut-centered intuitive drive. Then we start to get into the entrepreneurial process. We have to make decisions. We have to run a business. We have to order this or, run this analytical spreadsheet. And so a lot of times what happens is all of that start that happened here in the heart center, in that compassionate place, all of a sudden it starts to come up here. We get very head-brained. We start coming from a very analytical place. We start to kind of create story and just go through these more head-based processes. If that's something that you find yourself doing, do me a favor in the chat, just type me. Or if you're on screen, you can just raise a hand so I can see you. But I know for myself, my journey into entrepreneurship is very much about my heart is pulling me towards something. My gut is feeling intuitively driven towards something. So our wisest choices are always going to be in a place that we integrate our intelligences. Because this up here, this big heavy brain of ours up here, this only offers us one aspect of intelligence. The body, the rest of the body has this incredible intelligence to it. And so when we start to integrate those other intelligences, we make wiser decisions. And that's really what we want to kind of tap into today. Of course, in 45 minutes, there's not a ton of time, but hopefully it's enough time that I can give you a taste of what mBraining is and what the process feels like so that you can feel what it is to get back into your sense of compassion and intuition. So taking the time today to get into coherence, to tap into these energetic centers that we have I think is going to help you a lot, and what I'd like to invite you to do just right now, start to think about what's maybe even just a simple decision that you have to make, because what I'd invite you to do is, once we go into the actual process, you need something that you can actually process through. So just as I'm kind of starting this conversation off here, just kind of consider what's maybe just a simple decision you need to make inside of your business within the next week or two, within the next month. So what we'll do first is we'll just go through a quick overview. I don't want to get too far into like the scientific part of mBraining, because we could do 45 minutes just on that content. But I do want to introduce you to what mBraining means, what multiple brain intelligence is, and then we're going to connect on what coherence means, because coherence is an essential piece of getting the intelligences to integrate. So I'm going to walk you through how to get into coherence and why that's important. And then I'm going to take you through an actual mini mBraining session. We call it a highest expression session. And basically what we're going to do is we're going to take that thing that you've written down, that's a challenge or something that you have to make a decision on here in the next week, 2 weeks, month. We're going to actually take that challenge, that decision, and we're going to run it through your multiple brain intelligences. So if that sounds like a good plan to you, please in the chat say I'm with you. And I promise if you participate, you're going to have way more fun with me, because I like to have fun when I present. I don't want to be here by myself. So do me a favor, just type in the chat there. Awesome. Thank you. Very cool. All right. So first off, let's kind of tackle what is multiple intelligences. So I've already started to kind of jot it down here for you. So we've actually found, and neuroscience at this point has proven, that we at least have 3. And we're going to touch on the 3 that are kind of the most common. We are actually finding that very quickly, science is finding many, many more intelligences within the body. But we're going to focus on the 3 that are kind of most proven, most studied, which is the head, the heart, and the gut brain. So the head, which is the cephalic brain, we know there that we have anywhere from 50 to 100 billion neurons. So of course, this is that central computing system. This is kind of what runs the show. The head brain, when you think about what it means to be kind of heady, if you think about what part of your day this processes, you might think about analytical things. You might consider processing. And definitely you can think of the head as that processing system. Pretty much everything in the body comes up to the head and it gets analyzed, and then the head shoots it back down into the body and says, okay, do this. So if the fingers touch a hot surface, the signal comes in, it goes up here and it goes, oh crap, this hurts. And it tells the hand to move. That's where that circuitry, that's where that cycle happens. But that's just one part of our intelligence. As we drop down to the cardiac brain, which is the heart brain, it only has about 30 to 120,000 neurons, but it exhibits the same exact structures as the head brain. It has neuroplasticity to it. It's a complex neural network that we can actually see that signal is coming from the heart up to the head. And in fact, it used to be believed that more information was being started here and dropping down to signal here. And it's actually the opposite. We can actually identify that much more information is coming from here or down deep in the gut and heading up to the head. So when you think about heart intelligence, and this is very innate to you, what are some of the things you might consider would be heart intelligence? Type it into the chat for me. What are some of the things you would consider to be heart intelligence? Passion, emotion. Yeah, Scott and Annie. Feeling, Michael. Yes, for sure. Jeff, love, 100%. Scott, compassion. Scott hit on what the core competency of this thing is. Yes, Sonia, consideration, absolutely. The core competency of heart intelligence is our sense of compassion. Alexa, perfect. Empathy. Becky, kindness. Yes, for sure. So when we consider what comes from here, we feel this. I mean, who hasn't felt in their chest the sense of compassion? Who hasn't felt in their chest heartbreak or emotion like that? So we know that this thing is doing more than just circulating blood through the body. So then when we drop down into the enteric system, we call it the gut brain, but it's actually the entire enteric system. So within your entire enteric system, which goes all the way from the mouth, all the way to the exit point, you actually have 200 to 500 million neurons. 200 to 500 million neurons. And the same thing that we talked about with the heart, it exhibits the same characteristics as the head brain. Neuroplasticity. It can learn on its own. It can operate independently. When people go into a coma, the stomach doesn't stop working, right? So it actually has the ability to work autonomously too. Same thing with the heart. Interesting thing about the gut brain is it's actually the first thing that forms. When we go from that embryonic state, the very first thing that starts to form is the gut. And we like to talk about Mr. Sea Slug because the sea slug is a great example of gut intelligence, because the sea slug, all it is a big gut. It's just in a big enteric system. There's actually no cephalic brain in a sea slug, but it still is able to operate. So if you think about gut intelligence, deep gut intelligence, you say, oh, I have a gut feeling about this. What are we usually talking about? What do you guys think is gut intelligence? Yes, Michael. Instinct, for sure. Lainey, intuition, 100%. Yes. We definitely get those intuitive hits deep down in the belly, right? Alexa, fear. Yes, that could definitely be one. And we'll talk about why fear could come from the gut for sure in just a minute. So good. The core competency that we see from the gut is courage. If you think about those moments that you have to make a deeply courageous decision, where does that come from? It doesn't typically come from up here, does it? It comes from deep down here. That's where that courageous sense comes from. Now, here's the thing. We've kind of talked more about the positive core competencies of these three intelligences, but the fact is those three core competencies, creativity, compassion, courage, those can only happen if we are in a state of coherence. So this is where the autonomic nervous system really comes in and it plays a huge, huge part here. So your autonomic nervous system is constantly flowing in between sympathetic and parasympathetic. Let me actually change how I said that. It should be in your natural state, it would naturally be flowing between the parasympathetic and the sympathetic. So parasympathetic is that super calm just before sleep. We're kind of really restful. Typically when you're eating and digesting, you're in parasympathetic. Even though it's a really exciting process when you're making love, that's actually a parasympathetic state, believe it or not. Sympathetic is highly charged. This is our fight, flight, freeze, or appease state. This is when things are like, this is where stress starts to come in, right? So your body's natural balance is to be flowing back and forth between sympathetic and parasympathetic. Because a lot of times we hear that, oh, we should be in between. that actually doesn't happen. It's this constant soft flow between the two sides. And one of the things that controls that is the breath. So we're going to talk about how we use our breath to get us back into that coherent flow, back and forth from sympathetic to parasympathetic. But here's what's super important. When we talk about a core competency, so in the heart, we said one of the core competencies is compassion. So when we're here, flowing between sympathetic and parasympathetic, really balanced, compassion is generated. But if we take that core competency of compassion, and now we get ourselves into a sympathetic state, a highly charged, stressed out state, compassion can then become overly excited. Then compassion is no longer this healthy sensation, and it can become control. It can become obsession. So this core competency, if we become highly charged, becomes something highly energized, not necessarily a healthy sensation for us anymore. But same thing can happen the opposite direction. Compassion in this parasympathetic state can become apathy, because we're so laid back that it's kind of like, okay, cool. I don't really care too much. I'm chill, whatever. And that's not really where we want to be either. We want to be here in that state of, we call it calm, peaceful, but highly attentive. Calm and peaceful, but highly attentive. And when we're in that calm, peaceful state, but our mind is sharp, that's where our wisdom really comes online. And to your point, Alexa, you mentioned that fear could be a core competency of the gut. So the gut, again, if we're here in between, courage is one of the greatest things that our gut helps us to ignite. If we're flowing nicely between sympathetic and parasympathetic, if courage gets highly charged, that can become like bravado, ego, that like almost too courageous, right? But if courage becomes parasympathetic, that's where we can kind of come back into this place of like fear and reservation and retreat from something. So if this is making sense, just type "makes sense" in the chat for me. And if you have a specific question based on the three intelligences or what we've talked about with how coherence changes the core competencies, you can type that into the chat. I'm going to try and make sure that I have a few minutes at the end to come back and address any kind of specific questions too. I'm a talker though. I love to talk, so I have to be careful not to run over time. Alexa, is fear not an SNS state? So one thing I'll say about this, and it's probably kind of a complicated answer, but the simplest answer is that nothing is isolated in the way that we kind of portray it. So what I mean by that is sometimes what we do in this process that I feel we kind of do have to explain is that we're almost artificially isolating things. So especially an experience like fear, is it purely a gut reaction? No, not at all. In fact, the autonomic nervous system is an important part to play in self-preservation. Another intelligence is the pelvic brain. The pelvic brain is really important to our sense of self. And so all of these things are playing their part. So yeah, I don't want to insinuate that fear itself is just a gut intelligence state. So great question there. Sonia, how can we retain our patience? That's a good question. I would actually challenge you. And when we go through the guide through the highest expression, maybe that's something that you can work on with your highest expression. So when we go into the highest expression, maybe a question you can ask as we go through the different intelligences is how to maintain patience. Cool. So let's get ourselves into this coherent state, because this is super important to make sure that we can access the different intelligences. Your easiest, simplest access point into coherence, into the autonomic nervous system, is the breath. Excuse me. There are multiple other ways to access the autonomic nervous system. There's tons of other ways to get into coherence, but if you're sitting in your car, if you're sitting in the office, wherever you are, the one thing that you have access to at all times is the breath. And what's really interesting about the breath is one of the few things in our body that's co-innervated by the autonomic nervous system and the somatic system. So the breath, if you stop thinking about it, does it stop happening? No, it continues to happen. Thank God, right? That would become really exhausting to have to think about our breath 24 hours a day. That would suck. So thank God we can actually stop thinking about breathing, and it happens anyway. The great thing is we can start to think about breath. We can actually control it. And breath work has become such a huge, it's become a huge money-making industry at this point. But the reason is because it's such an incredible way to access so many systems. So in the throat, you have these things called baroreceptors. Those baroreceptors, they monitor the breath in and the breath out. The breath out triggers parasympathetic. The breath in triggers sympathetic. So if you create a balanced breath in with a balanced breath out, you'll start to find that your body starts to flow nicely between the in breath, which brings in the sympathetic, and then the out breath that creates the parasympathetic, the in breath that creates the sympathetic, the out breath that creates the parasympathetic. And it's such a beautiful and easy way to access this. So let's practice this together. If you want to close your eyes, if it helps you, great, you don't have to. But if it helps you to close your eyes to really kind of connect into the body, this is going to be really important that you connect into the body. And if you just start to bring the breath in and just notice how the breath is coming into the body. If the body starts to come up in the shoulders, you're doing what's called accessory breathing. You're breathing up here in your chest. So if you're feeling the shoulders kind of come up and down as you start to breathe, see if you can relax the chest and come back down here into the diaphragm. And you can even put your hands on your belly if you want. And the belly should expand a bit as you breathe in, and it should contract a little bit as you breathe out. And that's what we want. We want this nice diaphragmatic breathing that has a natural flow to it. So as you start to get deeper into the belly with the breathing, now start to count how many seconds in and how many seconds out the breath moves. So just take the next 2 or 3 breaths, just nice and natural. Don't try to control it, but just notice how many seconds is it natural for you to breathe in, and how many seconds is it natural for you to breathe out. Probably going to be somewhere between the 4, 5 to 6 seconds range. That's mainly what we see. So see if you can naturally harmonize those 2 patterns so that the in-breath has the same 4, 5, or 6 second count, and the out-breath has the same 4, 5, or 6 second out-breath. And just see if you can get that to harmonize. See if you can get them breath to mirror the same directions. So it's starting to really create this nice mirrored, balanced sort of breathing between the 2 states. And as you start to get into that coherent space, as you start to get into that coherent, balanced breathing, you should notice that the body starts to just settle in a little bit. Hopefully, it's not getting into meditative state, because that's not where we want to be, because we still want to be highly alert. We just want to be in that nice, calm space. So this is one of the easiest, simplest ways to find yourself into coherence, based on quite a few studies of balanced breathing and coherent breathing through multiple brain intelligence group, through heart math. Dr. Joe Dispenza has been doing tons and tons around coherence lately. Lots of different groups have been studying this, and what's really brilliant about it is it's easy, and it's fast, and it lasts a long time. They're finding even just 5 minutes of coherent, balanced breathing, you'll stay in coherence for a long period of time past that. So this is a great way, especially if you're having a challenging day, if there's hard decisions you have to make, to come back into a place where you can actually connect to your intelligence. So let's now start to go into that. So continue that balanced breathing. And again, if you want to close your eyes, you're welcome to. If you want to keep them open, whatever keeps you present, that's what's most important, because we want to be really present to the body here. We're going to walk you through how to start to connect to these different intelligences. And what I'd like you to do is just carry that question, that decision that you came up with in the beginning of when we started to talk. I just want you to hold that as your target. Hold that as the target, but hold it loosely and lightly. Because what we find is when we start to work through these different intelligences, things kind of come up on their own that might not even have anything to do specifically with the thing that you're trying to get your answer about, but it's all connected, right? Everything has a connection to it. So if you can just start to call that up, stay with your coherent breathing, just 6 seconds or anywhere between 4 to 6 seconds in, 4 to 6 seconds out. And just take that question that you have, that decision that you have, and just come in and start to bring focus into the heart center. And as you bring focus into the heart center, quite literally, ask the heart intelligence, what does it deeply desire? And please use that exact statement. What does it deeply desire for you to know about this decision? What does the heart deeply desire for you to know about the experience? The heart rarely talks to us in big sentences. It comes up with words very often. Sometimes it's metaphor. So it might just be a representation. Also, take notice to the sensation that you feel in the chest as you ask the question. Because again, the heart doesn't necessarily talk to us specifically just in sentences and in words. A lot of times it's just a sensation or a feeling. It might just be hardening, Maybe you ask the question and you feel a tightening in the chest. Maybe you ask the question and you feel an expansion in the chest. Maybe it starts to vibrate a little bit. I just had a session yesterday where there was this like light and kind of vibration that was moving through his chest as soon as he tapped into that heart center. So just as you start to ask that, anything that comes up, if you have a piece of paper there that you can write on, just sketch down what came up as you ask that question to the heart. What do you deeply desire that we know about this question or about this situation? And then as you let that just kind of float up into the mind, up into the head brain, just ask the head brain, what do we already know about this? What from a very just simple facts, analytical state, what do we already know? What story is already present about this decision? What story is already present about the situation and how I might handle it? And just let it have its saying again. Just pick up any kind of sensation that happens within the body. Pick up any kind of visualization, especially when we start to tap into the head brain. The head brain visualization happens really often. You might start to see some pictures, some imagery. You might even start to hear some sounds that come in. And again, it's not important to make sense of these things right now. Just let it come in, take notice of it, and then maybe sketch something down, write it out, whatever comes. And while we're here in the headspace, also just take notice of what creative comes forward. What's a creative aspect to this question? What's a creative solution to the challenge? What's something that you might not have seen before as a way to work through it? The brain's incredibly intelligent when it comes to creative thinking. Whatever comes up, just sketch it out a little bit, write it down on a piece of paper, wherever you like. When we do this one-on-one, we're able to kind of continue to build off of these things a little bit easier. So this is just a taste. And just whatever comes up in the head brain, take that information and just drop it back down into that heart center. And see if you can feel some integration between what's happening in the heart and what's happening in the head. See if there's some kind of connection that can be made there. And whatever's come up so far, start to check in with the heart. Is this compassionate? What is the most compassionate version of myself need to feel, need to hear, need to see about this? What about my connection with other people? How does this create connection to other people? How does empathy come in as part of the decision? Once you let that just sit there for a moment, now let it just really settle down deep into the belly. Just really fill that whole deep belly space with the question, with the challenge. And really ask yourself, if I think about this, if I sense this from a really deeply true self, my most true version of myself, what does my gut need to move forward? What does my gut need to feel that sense of courage? And just whatever started to come up in the heart brain, whatever started to come up in the head brain, start to also integrate that into the gut. And just notice how the gut reacts. Do you feel a tightening? Does it settle? You might even yawn, because that's part of the enteric system. You might, sometimes people get tastes within their mouth that might remind them of something. That's part of the metaphor process. Because again, a lot of times the gut is not going to speak to you in these big, long sentences and explain itself. The intelligence you're going to get from the gut is going to be through metaphor. It's going to be through sensation. It might just be a sense of motivation. Very often when we tap into the gut center with my coaching clients, the sensation is just, man, I feel motivated. But the gut also plays a big part in your self-preservation. So if you're getting a sense of hold back, wait, don't make a move, that's just as important. And it's something to trust. Because a lot of times we're so action-oriented, but the gut is telling us, hey, hang on, there's something important here. There's something about self-preservation that we have to tap into. And so we just have to start to trust those intelligences. And you've all had intuitive hits. When those intuitive hits come, they don't typically come as sentences. They come as a feeling. They come as a sensation. And that's part of how that gut area talks to us. So again, after you let that settle, any kind of sensations come up, any kind of energies come up, I just challenge you, just write it down. Again, no need to make meaning of it right this moment. Just noticing is so important. These intelligences, they're just like the head brain. When we talk about neuroplasticity, the principle of neuroplasticity is that things that fire together wire together, right? And if you don't use it, you'll lose it. Because the things that don't fire together, they start to detach. So if it's been a while since you have tapped into this heart intelligence, if it's been a while since you've tapped into this gut intelligence, it might not want to speak up too much yet. And so it's important to just start to take notice, because as you tap into these things, you're starting to refire these intelligences. And so whatever came up in the gut, just again, let that float right back up into the heart. And once again, check in with the heart and see, how is that starting to settle? What are important values to you as a human? Is it freedom? Is it peace? Is it love? Is it wisdom? And take those values that you hold so true to you and start to connect those to whatever started to come up as you've taken this through your different intelligences. And as you connect to those personal set of values, what's most essential and what's most important to you, again, take notice of the sensation that you feel in the body. The body is going to tell you yes or no in so many ways. It could be retraction and tightening. It could be expansion and opening. But you're going to know what that is for yourself. No one else can tell you what that is. You're only going to understand that through tapping into these intelligences. And so before you step away from this coherent breathing, just take a moment and just once again check in with that coherent breathing. Check in with that even pace of breath in, even pace of breath out. And you can just do a quick check-in from the heart to the head, back to the heart, down to the gut. You want to access these intelligences in this direction, kind of almost like a figure eight if you can. And just check in with the body and just simply ask, is there anything else I should know about this decision, about this situation? And see if anything else comes forward. And before you come back out, before you start to come back out of the coherent breathing process, it'll probably just naturally continue at this point. But just thanking the body, thanking the heart, thanking the gut intelligence, thanking the body's intelligence for actually participating and stepping forward. Maybe it seems a little silly, maybe it seems a little goofy, but it's so important that we connect to our body in a way that has gratitude behind it, because that's what's going to allow those intelligences to start to speak up again. I know for me, if I'm sitting at a table, there's a discussion happening, and I don't feel like I'm being seen with gratitude or being seen with open space, I don't want to speak. So the body does the same thing. Beautiful. So I would love if something came forward for you, some kind of little discovery, or even if it was just a sensation or some words, I'd love for you to just type it into the chat. Or just a word or two of how that experience was for you. And like I said, this is just kind of a quick sample of this. Typically a coaching session, an mBraining coaching session is usually about a full 60-minute session. And what's great about it is we can follow those hits that happen. So when you do start to get a sense of sensation, we can actually start to tap into the sensation more. Good, Thomas, it was helpful. Lainey's saying it was a sense of slowing down, reminder of the passion, the stress. Great, Lainey, I'm so stoked. Sarah's saying she loves learning about how to connect the three brains. Sonia, thumbs up, thank you. Glad you enjoyed that. So here's what I would challenge you to do, because if we spent 40 some odd minutes together and nothing happens, Becca's saying, great reminder, been too long since you've done it. Yes, you're right on track here. This is why it's so important, is that this can't just be a one-time thing. And here's why we end up here, is because we don't take time to reconnect. We don't give ourselves time. We don't give ourselves space to do some breathing process. I mean, it can be as simple as just starting to coherent breathe 3 or 4 times a day. Just set yourself a little stopwatch or something and do the breath for 2 minutes, 3 minutes, 4 minutes. It doesn't take much to find yourself into a coherent space. So my challenge to you is just start there. Just start to get coherent breathing as part of your practice, especially when it comes time to make decisions. Because especially as entrepreneurs, the hard decisions, that's what activates that analytical brain, because a lot of times the analytical brain wants to take over when we start to get into fight, flight, freeze, or appease, and it starts to swamp everything else. We've been told, use your head. We've been told, keep your emotions out of it. But the reality is all of it has to be present, but in equal value and an equal view. Because if every decision is just an analytical decision, we're missing so much. So you guys, you innately know that this is your natural state. You innately know it. And today, maybe just through the breathing process and checking in, you started to feel like, oh yeah, this is what I'm supposed to feel like. Your most natural state is this. A balanced, even flow between sympathetic and parasympathetic. We're not made to constantly be in a state of stress. Because what happens when we're constantly in a state of stress is at some point, we're going to find ourselves here, but not in a very natural version of it. So just remember that your natural state is in a state of peace, it's in a state of alertness, it's a state of calm, it's in a state of balance. And this is just a way to bring you back into that state. Thomas, thank you. Wholeness leads to peace and effectiveness. Absolutely. And it does, absolutely. To the Jungian archetypes, 100%, dude. Absolutely. Yes, thank you. So I'm always here for you as a resource. I'm pretty easy to find on Instagram. If you're on Instagram, I don't look at Facebook super often unless people directly message me on Facebook. I get an alert and I do respond to the direct messages, but I'm really easy to find. It's just my name on both platforms. I also have a website called The Journeyist Life. The Journeyist is a made-up name that my friend created for my coaching company, because I believe that we learn the most in our journeys that we take. So it's thejourneyistlife.com, and I'm always available to you as a resource. So Alex, definitely want to thank you and thank the whole crew that put together this show, because I know that it was a big project for you all, and I feel super, super honored for you guys to ask me to be here. And just want to take a moment to just honor the teachers that have taught me, my mentors, my teachers. Because like I said, this is not my content. I didn't create this. I didn't develop it. I'm just the person that gets an opportunity to share it with the world, which I'm very proud to do.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Andrew. And if I can just add a few words to that beautiful session. I'd just like to share with everybody who's on the call that mBraining and being part of the MBIT community has absolutely changed my life. From taking my coach certificate to then my master coach certificate, that I always say to people that it takes you back to the state of being properly human. And that's what it did for me. It reminded me of what it is to be a human being, which I feel like from when we go through the process of through school and into work or into business, that by small degrees, we kind of get off track over many years. And the mBraining process is the thing that can put you back on track to being who you really are and the best of who you really are. And it has been, I've spent, in the last 10 years, I've probably spent £100,000 on coaching, training, and being sat in rooms with some of the best people in the world, including Tony Robbins and Dean Graziosi on that. So I've trained a lot in business, but the best investment I've made in 10 years was in mBraining and in getting that learning and that discovery. And so it was a great pleasure to invite you along today, Andrew, and you were highly recommended, and thank you very much for doing your thing. It was amazing. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you. Appreciate that so much, and great testimony there. Appreciate it.
Great. Right. Thank you to everybody for being on the session, and we hope you all enjoyed it.
Thank you all.